Revenge office stories. My new boss decided to make an example of me by firing me on his first day, in front of the entire company. What he didn't know was that he hadn't just fired some random employee, he had just deleted the one and only master key that kept the company's entire digital world from crashing down. The chaos started exactly 23 minutes after I walked out the door, cardboard box and all. He thought he was cutting dead weight. In reality, he'd just taken a chainsaw to the company's spinal cord, and I was about to get a front row seat to watch the paralysis set in. Here's how it all went down. To really get the scale of the disaster that was about to unfold, you need to understand my role at Innovate Corp. I wasn't just some tech worker. I was the company's living history, coded into a system. I'm Sarah, I'm 36, and for the last 10 years I was the lead architect, and for a long time the only architect, of our internal operations system. When I started at Innovate Corp, it was a tiny startup with about 15 people, a couple of big ideas, and a workflow held together by spreadsheets and sheer willpower. My job as a junior dev fresh out of college was to bring some order to that mess. Over the next decade, bringing order became my whole world. I built a proprietary system from scratch that everyone called Nexus. Nexus wasn't just software, it was the company's digital heart. It handled everything. Our client database, our project management, our billing and invoicing, our resource allocation, our secure file storage, all of it. It was a massive, complex ecosystem that I had coded, patched, and expanded line by line year after year. As the company blew up from 15 employees to over 300, Nexus grew right along with it. Sales team needs a new way to track leads. I built it. Finance needs to comply with new international billing standards. I rewrote the invoicing engine. Project managers need a better way to track hours. I designed the dashboard. Now, here's the problem and my secret weapon. Nexus was a classic case of undocumented growth. In the early days, we were moving too fast to stop and write anything down. Management just saw documentation as time I wasn't spending on billable projects. Just keep it running, Sarah, my old boss David used to say. So I did. The real documentation lived in exactly one place, my head. I knew every bug, every workaround, every weird dependency. I knew which server got moody if you ran a process out of order. I knew the exact sequence of commands for the quarterly financial reconciliation, a sequence that existed on a faded sticky note on my monitor and absolutely nowhere else. I wasn't a manager. I hated corporate politics. My official title was Principal Systems Architect, which was a fancy way of saying I was the high priestess of Nexus, and everybody knew it. If something broke, they called me. If a new feature was needed, they emailed me. I was respected, I was essential, and I thought I was safe. I loved my work and the complex machine I had built. I had poured my life into that code. Then Innovate Corp was bought by some massive, faceless conglomerate. With the acquisition came promises of synergy, streamlining, and a whole new wave of managers. Our CEO took his golden parachute and vanished, and our old bosses were shuffled around or gently pushed out. And that's how David, my boss of 8 years, was replaced by a man named Richard Sterling. Richard, or Rich, as he insisted we call him, was a walking, talking cliché of a corporate shark. He was in his late 40s, with hair that looked like it was sculpted from pure gel, a Bluetooth earpiece that seemed permanently attached to his head, and a vocabulary made up of 90% meaningless business jargon. He strolled in on his first day with this air of smug superiority, like he'd just conquered a kingdom he didn't even know existed yesterday. His first all-hands meeting was something else. He stood in front of a room full of engineers and designers and talked for 45 minutes without saying a single real thing. He droned on about leveraging core competencies, paradigm shifts, and optimizing human capital. He looked at us not as people, but as numbers on a spreadsheet. I leaned over to my coworker Mark, a database admin who'd been there for 7 years, and whispered, "Does this guy have any idea what we actually do here?" Mark just shook his head grimly. He's a hatchet man, Sarah. They bring guys like this in to trim the fat. I wasn't worried. If anything, I was bone and muscle. Sure, my salary was on the higher end, but the value I provided was off the charts. Nexus ran the whole show. What a naive thought that was. Rich's first move was to schedule one-on-one synergy sessions with team leads. Mine was at 3 p.m. I walked into his office, David's old office, now completely sterile and decorated with framed posters of eagles. He didn't even ask me to sit. Sarah, right? Principal Systems Architect. He said the title with a little smirk, like it was a cute, folksy name for a job. Yes, I said. I've been here 10 years. I built and I maintain the Nexus system. He finally looked up from his tablet, his eyes cold. Right, Nexus. The legacy system. The reports I read say it's over-customized, poorly documented, and entirely dependent on a single point of failure. I was floored. It's custom because our business needs are unique. It's scaled with us for a decade with almost zero downtime. It's a liability, he snapped. Corporate wants us on a standardized platform like Salesforce or SAP. We're getting rid of these homegrown tinker toy projects. I just stared at him. The man had been in the building for maybe 6 hours and was already talking about tearing down a system that processed millions of dollars and was the product of a decade of my work. Rich, I said, trying to keep my voice even. With all due respect, you can't just unplug Nexus. It's dozens of integrated applications. Our entire client history, our project data, our billing, it's all in there. A migration would take years and cost millions. It would have to be done carefully with my direct oversight to keep the business running. He let out a short, condescending laugh. See, that's the kind of can't-do attitude I'm here to change. This attachment to the old ways is exactly why they brought me in. He leaned against his desk, crossing his arms in a classic power pose. I'm looking at your file. You're at the top of the pay scale, but you don't manage anyone. You're a high-cost asset in a role I plan to make obsolete in 6 months. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a synergy session. It was an execution. I need to make a statement on day 1, he went on. The team needs to see we're serious about a new direction. We can't have the old guard holding us back. He stood up straight. So, Sarah, as my first official act, I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. The words just hung there, so unbelievably stupid that I almost laughed. It was like watching a man walk onto an airplane and fire the only pilot, while bragging about his plan to redesign the wings mid-flight. You're firing me? I said, the words feeling weird in my mouth. On your first day, without the slightest clue what I do or what happens when I'm gone. I understand that you represent a bottleneck, and I'm clearing it, he said with smug certainty. HR will be here in a moment to escort you out. We'll deactivate your access immediately. Your badge, please. He held out his hand. I was in shock, a mix of humiliation and pure, white-hot anger. I unclipped my badge and dropped it into his palm. I didn't say another word. You can't argue with an idiot. You can only wait for the crash. As the HR rep led me out, I heard Rich on his phone, his back to me. Yeah, it's done. Just cut the head off the snake. Time to move forward. Little did he know the snake he'd just beheaded was the only thing holding up the entire building. The walk back to my desk was surreal. The normally buzzing office fell dead silent as I passed. Every head popped up. Rich had made his statement, all right. He'd just publicly executed the company's most critical technical employee. The look on their faces wasn't pity, it was fear. If he could fire me, nobody was safe. My desk was a fortress of monitors and technical manuals. The HR rep stood awkwardly by with a cardboard box. I'm so sorry, Sarah, she mumbled. I just nodded, my mind racing. I packed my keyboard, my mouse, the little plant my team gave me years ago. I looked at the faded sticky note on my center monitor, the one with the cryptic sequence for the quarterly financial reconciliation. That process was due to run next week. I smiled, a tiny, bitter smile, and left the note right where it was. It was a language only I spoke, and without my access, it was just gibberish. Mark, the database admin, rushed over, his face pale. "This is nuts," he whispered. "He can't do this. Sarah, the billing run for the Sterling Archer account is tonight. You have to kick it off manually. It's one of the old modules you never got to fully automate." I paused. The Sterling Archer account. Our biggest client. A contract worth millions a year. The invoicing was a mess of tiered pricing that required a manual script to run. "I guess someone else will have to figure it out," I said, my voice hollow. "There is no one else." Mark hissed. "Nobody has the access. Nobody knows the script. I don't even know where it is." "It's not my problem anymore, Mark," I said, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. My access was probably already gone anyway. I was escorted out the front door like a common criminal, standing on the sidewalk, clutching my box. The sheer injustice of it all washed over me. 10 years of loyalty gone. Thrown out by an arrogant fool in a cheap suit. The drive home was a blur. I dropped the box on the floor of my apartment and just stood there in the deafening silence. The shock wore off, replaced by a wave of pure panic. I was 36 with a mortgage. My entire professional identity was gone. And then, another feeling started to bubble up through the fear. Rage. A cold, righteous fury. Rich had tried to humiliate me. He thought he'd cut the head off the snake. He had no idea the snake was the whole nervous system, and it was still connected to a very, very angry brain. I picked up my phone and called my cousin Jessica. She's a partner at a top labor law firm, specializing in wrongful termination. "Jess?" "It's Sarah," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I need your help. I think I've just been wrongfully terminated, and I think I'm in a position to make them regret it. Deeply." I spent the next 2 hours telling her everything. When I was done, there was a long pause. "Sarah," Jessica finally said, and I could hear the grin in her voice. "This isn't just a wrongful termination case. This is a work of art. Firing a long-term, critical employee without cause, for show, with no transition plan for an undocumented system? Oh, this is beautiful." She continued, "Okay, first, forget about at-will employment for a second. We can argue there was an implied contract here based on your tenure and performance, and he had no good cause. That's our negotiating leverage. But that's just the appetizer, Sarah. The main course is Nexus. The company owns the code, I know," I started. "Of course they do," she cut in. "We're not arguing that. But the knowledge of how it all works, the undocumented processes, the keys in your head, that's your expertise. They fired the one person who can operate their own company. They didn't just fire an employee, they locked themselves out of their own house and threw away the key." A plan started to form in my mind, cold and clear. I wasn't going to beg for my job back. I wasn't going to sue for a quick payout. I was going to wait. I knew they'd come crawling back. And when they did, I wasn't going to be Sarah the employee. I was going to be Sarah, the extremely expensive consultant. My personal cell buzzed. A text from Mark. "It's starting. The nightly data backup just failed. Authentication error. An error only you've ever known how to bypass." I looked at the text. It had been 3 hours. The first domino had fallen. The show was about to begin. If you're enjoying the story so far and want to see how this clueless boss gets what's coming to him, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and you won't want to miss the fallout. Now back to the story. On Jessica's advice, I went completely dark. I turned off my work phone and buried it in a drawer. I logged out of all my emails. My personal cell was for intelligence gathering only. I would not respond. I would not help. Every frantic call that went unanswered was another nail in Rich's professional coffin. The first 24 hours were quiet. The backup failure was an internal crack in the foundation that only the tech team would see. But I knew what was coming. That backup script also re-indexed the databases. Without it, the system would start to slow down. Slowly at first, then all at once. By morning, my phone started buzzing. A text from Jenna, another developer. "Hey Sarah, hope you're okay. Weird question, but the project management dashboard isn't loading for any of the PMs. Just timing out. Any ideas?" I smiled. The dashboard was a resource hog. Without the nightly reindexing, the database queries were choking. The timeouts had begun. Then came a text from Linda in finance. "Hi Sarah. So sorry about what happened. On a totally separate note, and I hate to ask, but do you have a copy of the reconciliation report from last quarter? The one on the drive seems to be corrupted." Corrupted. Beautiful. The shared drive was part of Nexus. The failed backup meant the file integrity check never ran. A few bits probably flipped. No backup, no clean copy. Linda was screwed. The real fun started around noon on day 2. Mark called, his voice tight with panic. "Sarah, please pick up. It's Sterling Archer." The invoice never went out. I stayed silent, letting him talk. We tried to find the script. We looked everywhere. We can't find the data collation script. The client is calling, asking where their invoice is. Rich is in a meeting with them right now, and I can literally hear him shouting from my desk. I could just picture it. Rich, Mr. Synergy, trying to explain to their biggest client why they couldn't send a simple bill. "Sarah, please," Mark begged. "Just tell me where the script is." "I'm sorry, Mark," I said, my voice calm and detached, using the exact words Jessica gave me. "I am no longer an employee of Innovate Corp. I cannot provide any assistance. It would be a legal liability." "A legal liability?" "Sarah, it's us." "My legal counsel has been very clear," I said a little firmer. "I can't help. Good luck." I hung up. It felt awful, but Mark was a casualty in a war I didn't start. My fight was with Rich. An hour later, an unknown number called. I let it go to voicemail. It was Arthur Vance, a senior vice president, Rich's boss's boss. "Ah, yes, Ms. Jensen," he sounded flustered. "This is Arthur Vance, calling about a few operational hiccups. It seems there was a misunderstanding about your departure. Please call me back." A misunderstanding. The corporate word for we messed up badly. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Jessica. Caption, "They're nibbling." The final call of the day was the one I was waiting for. "Rich." I let it ring 4 times, then answered on speaker. "This is Sarah." "Sarah." Finally, he snapped. "Listen, I don't know what games you're playing, but they stop now. The Sterling Archer invoice is missing and the PM dashboard is down. I'm telling you, as your boss." He caught himself. I just let the silence hang there. "As a former manager," he corrected, his voice strained, "I am instructing you to cooperate." I almost laughed. The nerve. "Rich," I began, my voice ice cold. "Let me be very clear. You are not my boss. You are the man who fired me. You said my role was obsolete. It sounds like you're just experiencing the consequences of your own decision." "This is sabotage," he sputtered. "You sabotaged the system." "No," I said calmly. "Sabotage would have been breaking something before I left. I didn't. I simply stopped doing the job you fired me from. The system is working fine. It's just missing its mechanic. This isn't sabotage, Rich. This is cause and effect. I'll sue you. I'll ruin your reputation," he threatened. "Go ahead," I said, quoting Jessica again. "A lawsuit means legal discovery. My lawyers would get all your internal emails about my firing. I wonder how firing a critical employee on day 1 just to make a statement will look to a judge. So please, Rich, make my day." Total silence on his end. He had nothing. No threats, no leverage. He was trapped in a mess of his own making, and he was just realizing I had the only key. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, defeated. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm busy. Don't call this number again." I hung up and let out a long breath. The anger was gone. replaced by a feeling of pure, absolute power. The next morning, an email from Arthur Vance, the SVP, was in my inbox. Subject: urgent, a proposal. It was a masterclass in corporate groveling. He talked about my invaluable contributions and the unfortunate and rash decision made by Rich. He acknowledged the significant operational challenges and offered me immediate reinstatement with a significant raise and a promotion to Director of Systems Integrity. I laughed out loud. Go back to work for that idiot? They still didn't get it. They thought they could buy me off with a fancy title. They didn't realize the power had shifted. I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking for payback. I forwarded it to Jessica. Checkmate. She called instantly. Not yet. This is an insult. They're trying to put the leash back on. We're not accepting reinstatement. You're no longer Sarah the employee. You are Sarah Jensen, CEO of Jensen Systems Consulting. Following her script, I replied to Arthur. I politely declined reinstatement, stating I was pursuing a new career as an independent consultant. I wrote, however, given my unique expertise, I'm willing to offer my services on a short-term contract to help you stabilize the platform and create a transition plan. My consulting fee is $500 per hour, with a 40-hour weekly minimum for a non-negotiable term of 6 months. All work will be done remotely. Also, there's a one-time system knowledge transfer fee of $50,000 payable upfront. I hit send, my heart pounding. The numbers were outrageous, designed to make them choke. It would cost them over $170,000 for 6 months of my time, way more than my old yearly salary. The response came in under 10 minutes. Your terms are exorbitant. This is not feasible. As Jessica instructed, I replied immediately, I understand. Best of luck resolving your current challenges. And then we waited. It was a high-stakes game of chicken. I knew that with every passing hour, their problems were compounding. The database was grinding to a halt, more clients were getting angry, and the pressure on Arthur was becoming immense. Suddenly, my exorbitant contract would start to look like a bargain. It took 2 agonizingly silent days. I got my hair done. I went to the gym. I acted like someone without a care in the world, even though my stomach was in knots. Had I pushed too far? Then, Friday afternoon, an email from Innovate Corp's legal department arrived. Attached was a contract. It met every single demand: the hourly rate, the minimum term, the upfront fee. But there was one more thing, tucked under additional conditions. It said, as a condition of this agreement, Innovate Corp will conduct a full internal review of the management decisions leading to the initial termination of Ms. Jensen's employment. I just stared at that sentence. It was corporate speak for, we're firing Rich and we want you to know it. They were sacrificing him to appease the god in the machine they had so foolishly angered. I signed the contract, sent it back, and got confirmation that $50,000 had been wired to my brand new business account. On Monday morning, I logged in with special temporary credentials. The first thing I did was fix the Sterling Archer invoice. It took 15 minutes. Next, I re-indexed the databases. Within an hour, everything was running perfectly. I was a ghost in their machine, fixing their million-dollar problems from my living room, billing them $500 an hour for the privilege. My 6-month contract was both lucrative and incredibly satisfying. I rarely worked more than 20 hours a week, meticulously documenting every corner of the system I had kept in my head for a decade. I trained a new team of their developers, who all looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. I was always polite, always professional, and always on the clock. As expected, the internal review was quick. 2 weeks into my contract, an all-company email announced that Richard Sterling was no longer with the company. I later heard he was fired and escorted out with his own cardboard box, a perfect karmic echo. His entire legacy at the company was creating a multi-million-dollar crisis that got him fired in less than a month. In total, Innovate Corp paid me just under $200,000 for 6 months of work. With that money, I officially launched Jensen Systems Consulting. My first client, a direct competitor of Innovate Corp, who was more than happy to pay for a better, cleaner version of Nexus. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about shouting or confrontation. It's about knowing your own worth and letting arrogant people drown in the chaos they create. Rich tried to make an example out of me, and I guess he did. I became an example of what happens when you underestimate the quiet person in the corner, the one who built the world you're standing on, and knows exactly how to let it all fall apart.